So, you've heard that rogues are the weakest class in D&D 5e now in the 2024 rules era. You might have even heard that from me. Is it true? Is rogue damage terrible now? Could we build one that can keep up damage-wise and still bring all the fun and potent utility, and especially now, control and debuffing that rogues are so good at? Answers to those questions and more in today's build. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into one specific character build for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really powerful but also really fun to play. So if you also really enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just really like theory crafting, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you are thinking about playing, then welcome home. And today, and for the foreseeable future, I mean literally my home. Welcome to my home. I have moved offices. The lease in the old place came up. They were asking way too much money for it. I have a spare bedroom in my house, so it just made sense to bring it home. That's where I am. Hopefully, it still feels comfortable and familiar to you. I've done my best to recreate the studio like I had it. That might be changing sometime in the near to midterm, but anyways, I hope you like it here. My name's Colby. So yeah, that's what a bunch of us are saying, right? Rogues might be the weakest class in the game now. Chris, Treant Monk, and I talked about that in our little 2024 Player's Handbook preview video series a few months ago. And even though when I did my 2024 Assassin build here that Wizards of the Coast gave me early access to in order to build last summer, I argued there that rogues were better than ever now thanks to all the non-damage buffs they got. But I did also still say in that video that, well, yeah, I wish they would have gotten a little more damage. But do they really need it? Chris himself put out a video just a couple of days ago. I'm flying through my cards today. As I'm recording this, anyways, it was a couple days ago, talking about how pleasantly surprised he was at the rogues' damage when he crunched the numbers for them on like just a straight class build, right? And I've been suspicious that thanks to some fun new toys like weapon masteries, the sustained damage might keep up, at least with my optimized baseline build that I did a few weeks back. And whether it can or not, I really want to find out where we're at with rogues if we push ourselves. But also, it's important to me for this exercise to see how high we can get damage-wise if we don't multi-class too much. In the 2014 5e rules, I've said this a million times, you almost always wanted to take at least 5 levels in another martial class as a rogue so that you could get extra attack. And those builds didn't really feel all that roguey, right? Especially if your campaign only lasts like until level 8 or 10. But I have a hunch that rogues are actually going to be a little less reliant on extra attack these days than they used to be. Depending on the build, anyways. And maybe especially depending on the subclass we take. So let's jump in to D&D episode number 187, the 2024 Soulknife Rogue. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week. He's so good. I love the look of this one. A drow with a cape. Come on. So stylish. If you'd be interested in following Randall to see the other stuff that he's done, or even potentially see if you can commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. And also, first, I have an important message for anyone who has ever felt a little frustrated as a DM trying to build, manage, and keep track of your world and your campaign, or who has felt frustrated as a player trying to keep track of not only their own character, but also all of the people that you've met, the places that you've been, and events that have transpired over the course of your campaign. I have got a solution for your frustrations, and it's called World Anvil, the sponsor for today's video. For those who don't know, World Anvil is basically the best software out there for both GMs to build their homebrew world and for players to interact effortlessly with that world. For you world builders, World Anvil supports over 45 systems, including D&D and Pathfinder, as well as dozens more. It will even help you integrate your own gaming system to work with their software. World Anvil makes it incredibly easy to create wiki-style presentations of your world and your writing so that you can keep track of everything you build. They also have a fantastic interactive map builder that you can customize to your heart's delight, and even chronicles that combine timelines with those maps so that you can plot and keep track of what happened where and when in your world, whether before your campaign started or while your campaign has been going on. Presenting information to your players has never been more seamless. And yeah, World Anvil is for players too. I know as a player, I use it, right? It not only makes it easier than ever to access everything that your GM wants you to know about their world and campaign, but you can even build your character right from within World Anvil's site, regardless of the game system that you're using. Keep your character sheet, your backstory, your journal entries, and your session notes all in one place, where all of the information that you need about your GM's world is just a click away. So please, you guys, if you haven't yet, do yourself a huge favor. Go check out World Anvil. Sign up for a free account. If you don't have one, to see what you might be missing, you got nothing to lose. When you do so, I would appreciate it if you would use this URL right here so that they know I sent you. I'll put a link in the video description as well, of course. But here is the pièce de résistance. If you decide to purchase a yearly subscription, use the code D4 at checkout and you will save an incredible 51%. Yes, 51. Over half. So huge thanks to World Anvil. You guys are the best. Really appreciate you and your support of the channel. Let's get into the build. Hey everybody. Coming to you from the editing room with some important information. I unfortunately made a really big mistake with this build that has a very high likelihood to either change the numbers for it or to change how you might build it. Maybe both. I'm going to insert another edit when I get to that place in the build to talk about it a little bit more in depth, some potential solutions, workarounds, but just wanted to give you all a heads up right at the beginning that there's a complication coming. See if you can guess what it might be or see if you can spot my screw up. Okay, at level 1, for our starting class, we are actually starting with the class that I'm claiming to be building for today. Hooray! I love rogues. I love that they start off with 4 skill proficiencies at level 1. I love that they get just about everything that they need to be a really effective scout, spy, and lockpick right away. As for our species here, I'm gonna say, yes, let's go with elf, and just right out the gate, I'll tell you the main reason we're doing this is because I want access to the elven accuracy feat. If you can't play with features from older books or just straight up would rather take a different species, go ahead. I think my runners up here would be human, so I could get 2 origin feats. There are just several that I'd love to have. Or halfling, because halfling rogue, duh. But also, luck is a pretty great feature. So is being naturally stealthy and everything else they get, but yeah, I love luck. Not crit failing is awesome. Anyways, in 2024, elves get to choose between being a drow, a high elf, or a wood elf. All of them are pretty solid choices. All give a cantrip at level 1 and then another spell at level 3 and at level 5 that you can use once per long rest. I think I'd probably go with high elf since I love that we basically get to choose any wizard cantrip and that we get Misty Step at level 5, but I could probably be convinced that wood elf is the better choice, maybe especially for this build as they have more speed, potentially even more speed with Longstrider, and Pass Without Trace feels like a really great spell to have on a rogue. Randall apparently really liked the drought. That's fine. Pick your favorite. You're going to be good regardless. As for our background, I am really going to just say, if you can, if it's at all possible at your table, take an old background or a custom background here. None of the ones in the 2024 Player's Handbook give me everything I want, namely the origin feat I want and the ability score increase that I want. If I had to take one of the new predetermined backgrounds, I'd probably go with Wayfarer or Criminal, since they have the ability score increases I want and a good origin feat. Sage would be one to consider, but they don't give me all of the ability score increases I want, which frustrates me. The origin feat that I want is Magic Initiate Wizard, right? As this lets us learn 2 more cantrips from the wizard spell list and a first level spell of our choice that we can cast once per day. For the cantrips, I'd love to have Message for some nice telepathic communication when we're scouting ahead. True Strike would not be a bad option to take here, or Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade if you can get it. Though, because of the way that we're going to be using weapons, I'm not sure that I'd necessarily want to go that route. But then, yes, for the first level spell, Find Familiar, which I'd plan on using to take the help action in combat to give us advantage on our first attack on our turn. If familiars don't really work like you want them to at your table, or your DM is in the habit of killing them whenever they show up, which honestly is a great thing for us. But anyways, the shield spell would be really nice to have once in a while, or sure, take a different origin feat like Lucky to just give yourself advantage a few times per day at least, or Alert for massive bonuses to initiative. That's always fantastic. For our starting ability scores, I'm assuming we're going the point buy method as always, and say let's start with a 15 dexterity, take a +2 there, a 15 wisdom and a +1 there, and then a 14 constitution. Though you could totally swap the wisdom and the constitution there if you really wanted, depending on if you had to take a set background or could make your own, of course. We're not going to be concentrating on a spell. Well, maybe later, but it'll be much later. So Constitution was a little less important for me on this build, and I kind of just feel like rogues really need to be great at spotting those traps and hidden doors, right? So I'd favor Wisdom personally. As for our starting equipment, let's grab some studded leather and then a whole bunch of daggers. And yes, we are going to be thrown weapon specialists here. No, this is not the Needler 2.0, the original of which you can find there. I think that's my last card for the day. I loved that build. It was a thrown weapon specialist focusing on darts. I might do a 2.0 version of it one day. Throwing daggers will be great for us since we get weapon mastery at Rogue 1 here, meaning we could get mastery in the dagger, which is a finesse melee weapon with the thrown and light properties, meaning that we can use our dexterity when we attack with it, whether we stabby or throwy, and that we can use them to do, 2-weapon fighting, right? Since they're light weapons. But since they have the nick property, we can throw 2 of them, or stab, I guess. There's no real reason to throw them yet, though that will change. I mean, other than the inherent benefits that come with making attacks from ranged instead of melee, I suppose, which aren't nothing. But anyways, we can throw 2 of them with our action, thanks to Nick, right? Leaving our bonus action free, which is wonderful. Don't forget, we won't add our dexterity modifier to that Nick attack. Every time I say that. Nick attack! That dang Nick and his freaking attack. Hate that guy. But yeah, no dex modifier to the, offhand attack, at least not until we were able to pick up the 2-weapon fighting style. Might happen eventually. Anyways, as a Rogue One, we also get Thieves' Cant, which is their special coded language that they can send messages to one another with. And then we get Expertise, which lets us double our proficiency bonus on 2 of the skills that we're proficient in. And I tend to prefer Stealth and Perception, personally, for obvious reasons, I think. Though I wouldn't fault you for swapping one of those out for Sleight of Hand, as it seems that is the skill that we'd be using for checks with our Thieves' tools now, as it always should have been, I think, when we try to pick a lock or disarm a trap, just like it is in Baldur's Gate 3, right? Take a drink. And, speaking of, do you guys mind if I go on a little rant here? Feel free to skip ahead 60 seconds or so if you don't want to hear it. This is one of my biggest pet peeves about the way that tools work in the new Player's Handbook. On page 220 of the PHB, we are told that if you have a proficiency with a tool, you add your proficiency bonus to any ability check you make that uses the tool. Okay, great, feels familiar. But then here's what makes me mad. If you have proficiency in a skill that's used with that check, you have advantage on that check too. Awesome. Proficiency bonus and advantage. Okay, sounds great. But then you look at the tools, and we are never told what skill we're supposed to be using when we use a tool. Each tool has an associated ability: intelligence for brewer supplies, strength for smith's tools, dexterity for thieves' tools. But where's the skill? What skill do I use for brewer supplies in order to determine if I have advantage when I use them? Some intelligence-based skill, I presume. Is it investigation? Is it nature? It's probably not religion. Although actually, there were a lot of monks that were known for being great brewers of alcohol, so maybe. Now, If we look at a lock in the equipment section on page 226 of the Player's Handbook, we see that we can use Thieves' Tools to pick a lock with a successful sleight of hand check. So, okay, I think I can assume that all locks require sleight of hand, but what about disarming traps? Probably? If so, this is great because as a rogue, expertise in sleight of hand is then way less important, so long as we've got at least proficiency, since that would let us add our proficiency bonus and give us advantage on the check when we use those Thieves' Tools to try and pick a lock or disarm a trap. But I don't know why they couldn't list the associated skill with the tool alongside the associated ability score. Is the DM just supposed to decide what the associated skill is supposed to be for each tool? Do some tools just not have a skill associated with them? Look at me, I'm malting. I don't know. It feels like Wizards of the Coast kind of forgot to put that in here or something. Or maybe, yeah, there's just not generally supposed to be a skill tied to every tool. And having advantage on checks you make with them is only supposed to happen once in a while, depending on the tool and depending on what you're trying to do with it. Maybe the Dungeon Master's Guide that's coming out soon will shed further light on it. I don't know, but okay, end of rant. Finally, though, as a rogue at level 1, we get Sneak Attack, which famously allows us to add a d6 of damage for now once on a turn to an attack that is made with either a finesse or ranged weapon. Check. When we either have advantage on the attack or are attacking an enemy that's within 5 feet of one of our allies. Should be easy enough with our familiar especially and our ability to throw weapons from range, letting us more easily choose our target, but soon we're going to get something that's going to give us an even more reliable advantage, so just hang tight. Before we get to level 2, really quick, just want to give a shout out to my channel members. Thank you guys so much for your support. I could not do this without you. You are amazing. Everybody else, I would love it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member. Click the button that says join down there. It doesn't commit you to anything. It just shows you the potential perks you could get if you decided to become a member. Access to the library of write-ups that I do for each of these builds that help you recreate it yourself a little more easily. Access to the community Discord server. Access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. I would love to have you as a more integral part of the D4 community, but if you can't or don't want to, that's fine. Just being here and watching and liking and subscribing and clicking the notifications bell, all the things really are great ways to support the channel too. So thanks for just being here and doing those. At level 2, rogues get Cunning Action. That tells us we can use a bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide. Always useful. At level 3, first up we get Steady Aim, which was ported over from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, right? This tells us that so long as we don't move before the attack and are okay with our movement being reduced to 0 for the rest of the turn afterwards, we can use a bonus action to give ourselves advantage on our next attack this turn. Nice to have in a pinch, for some builds especially, maybe especially if we have a mount, but not something that I'm planning on using a whole lot with this build. Because we also get our Rogue subclass at level 3, right? Like all classes now, and in case you couldn't tell from the title and the thumbnail, yeah, we're going with my very favorite rogue subclass. No, it's not the assassin or the arcane trickster, but in fact, the Soulknife. This subclass is just so freaking cool. They're like Psylocke, but in D&D. There's so many fun and flavorful psychic abilities. Let's read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about them in 2024. Strike foes with psionic blades. A soul knife strikes with the mind, cutting through barriers both physical and psychic. These rogues discover psionic power within themselves and channel it to do their roguish work. As a soul knife, your psionic abilities might have haunted you since childhood, revealing their full potential only as you experienced the stress of adventure. Or you might have sought out an order of psychic adepts and spent years learning how to manifest your power. Awesome. I appreciate the little seedlings of backstory that they're kind of throwing us here. As a soul knife, we get 2 features here. The first, psionic power, is kind of 2 features itself. It says that we get 4 psionic energy dice per long rest, though we regain 1 of them when we take a short rest, which is nice. Those dice are d6s for now, though they do get bigger with rogue level. And for now, we can use them to do 2 things. Psi-bolstered Knack lets us add our psychic energy die to a failed check we make with any skill or tool that we have proficiency with, potentially turning the failure into a success. So it's kind of like having a limited bardic inspiration die, but the best part is we only use up the die if the energy die turned that failure into a success, right? Otherwise, it's not even used up. So use this liberally. And I think this ability makes soul knives the best skill monkeys of all rogues, who are arguably the best skill monkey class in the game. So that's saying something, right? But then there's also the Psychic Whispers option, which lets us take a magic action to set up a mental link between us and up to proficiency bonus number of other creatures. So 2 others for now. And then we roll our energy die and communicate with each other telepathically for the number of hours we rolled. And it works so long as we're just within a mile of each other. And the first time we use it per day, we don't even need to spend the energy die. Dang. That is some grade A utility right there. Maybe the message cantrip isn't that important after all, though it still might be nice to have in a pinch. Oh, and we haven't even gotten to my favorite Soulknife feature yet, Psychic Blades. So Psychic Blades says that when we take the attack action or make an opportunity attack, thanks for adding that in 2024, WotC, we can conjure a Psychic Blade in our free hand and make an attack with it. The blade is a simple melee weapon with the finesse and thrown properties. It does 1d6 psychic damage on a hit, and also new to 2024 has the Vex Mastery. And we don't even have to use up one of our 2 weapon masteries to enjoy the Vex property with it, right? The blade vanishes immediately after the attack and leaves no trace on the target if it hits. So cool. Kind of feels like a shard blade. Should we start doing a Stormlight Archive drinking game? No. Anyways, here's something cool. After you attack with the blade, you can make an attack with a second one as a bonus action on the same turn if your other hand is free. It's only a d4 for that one, right? But here's the beauty. If we're not using our bonus action to make an offhand thrown dagger attack, which we're not since daggers have the Nick weapon mastery, then on our turn now, we can make 1 Psychic Blade thrown attack, make a second thrown attack with a dagger, and then, since our bonus action is free and our hands are empty, summon a second Psychic Blade and make a third attack on our turn. Yeah, that's 3 attacks at level 3, and we are a freaking rogue. I love this so much. And wouldn't it be nice if it really worked that way? But alas, rules as written, it does not. Because you see, even though they have the finesse and the throne properties, and they're freaking made of psychic energy, Psychic Blades do not, in fact, have the light property. How much does psychic energy weigh? I guess if you ask my therapist, quite a lot. I'm not quite sure why I failed to remember this very important detail when I was putting this build together. Maybe it's because I kind of tend to equate Psychic Blades in my head with like the Shadow Blade, and Shadow Blade does have the light property as well as finesse and throne. I think it's probably because under the 2014 rules, it didn't really matter that Psychic Blades didn't have the light property. Really all we got from the light property was the ability to kind of make an attack with one and then use our bonus action to attack with another, right? But the 2014 Soulknife could do that with their Psychic Blades anyways. And I mean, we still can. But with the introduction of weapon masteries and Nick in 2024, suddenly it does matter very much that Psychic Blades have or don't have the light property. And since they don't, then rules as written, you couldn't actually make an attack with one and then qualify for a Nick light weapon attack, dagger attack, right, as part of your action, because both of the weapons that you're using need to have the light property in order for that to work. And I am so embarrassed and frankly a little humiliated that I made such a huge mistake here. So I apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. But rather than just scrapping the entire video and a week's worth of work for both me and my editor, I'm just gonna say that there are a couple of potential workarounds here to pull off the concept of this build. The first is the best and the easiest, though not necessarily a guarantee at all tables, and it's just to convince your DM to let Psychic Blades have the light weapon property. I don't think it's a huge stretch. Hopefully your DM has a pretty good grasp on the fact that rogue damage isn't really in a fantastic place at the moment, and so letting you get one additional thrown dagger attack on your turn isn't going to do anything super game breaking. Maybe encourage them to watch this video. The second option is a little more complicated, and it's basically going to involve changing the build. And I've got a couple of ideas on how to do so that I will lay out in the final thoughts. So stay tuned, or just skip to the final thoughts if you want. Oh, and big thanks to the channel members and Discord users, Mr. Echo and Endless Dream in particular, for drawing my attention to my own memory lapse and inspiring some potential workarounds. I owe you guys one. Okay, Let's get back to the really cool and potentially really flawed build. Oh, and also, that bonus action, Psychic Blade attack, does add our ability score modifier to the damage, even though we don't have the 2-weapon fighting style, right? That's awesome. Even if it's, only a D4 damage die, it's still solid damage. Especially since it's potentially one more chance to add our sneak attack damage on our turn, which does jump up to 2d6 at this level. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and yes, I am totally taking Elven Accuracy, because between our familiar and now the Vex property on our Psychic Blades, we should have advantage quite a bit on our turn. Potentially every single turn. I'll kind of go over the logistics of that in a minute. But yeah, since we're making our attacks with dexterity and we're an elf, why not? Elven Accuracy is one of my favorite feats, letting us bump our dexterity by 1 for this build, so that's a nice even 18 now. And also letting us basically roll 3 d20s instead of 2 when we have advantage on our attack. That's going to mean not only a better hit chance, but also a better crit chance. And we really love crits when we can potentially double our sneak attack damage in addition to our weapon damage, right? Now, if you can't or don't want to play with Elven Accuracy, that's fine. Feel free to grab a different feat that bumps our dexterity here. I would maybe go with Skulker, perfect for rogues, or Mage Slayer, actually, which got some nice buffs. Or even just, Skill Expert for maximum skill monkiness. But at level 5, now that we've got our subclass and our first feat, I think I would take a quick little multi-class detour. I want to take a fighter dip, as I so often do. There are so many great reasons to dabble in, as my good friend Monty from the Dungeon Dudes famously put it, the bacon of D&D that is fighters, since they go so well with everything.
Bacon pancakes, making bacon pancakes. Take some bacon and I'll put it in a pancake. Bacon pancakes, that's what it's gonna make. Bacon pancakes.
For us, it's not for the weapon masteries that we would get at Fighter 1, though having 3 more weapons that we could master is pretty cool, but go ahead and pick your favorites there. Nor are we doing this for the Second Wind ability, though healing ourselves for a d10 plus our fighter level twice per day and once more per short rest will be a nice little perk. But no, we are primarily here for the fighting style that we get at Fighter 1, because that would let us take thrown weapon fighting, which tells us that when we hit with a ranged attack roll using a weapon that has the thrown weapon property, we get a +2 to the damage roll. And while that's not a ton of damage, since we're making 3 thrown weapon attacks per turn, it's potentially 6 damage per round. And that's not nothing. It's almost as good as a d12 of extra damage every round. But at level 6, sure, Action Surge would be great. If I really wanted to go for burst damage here, I'd probably grab it. If for no other reason so that I could ready that second action once in a while to make a reaction attack and get my sneak attack damage twice, right? But I'm going for sustained damage here, and so I want to get back to Rogue. I told you guys we were going almost straight Rogue today, and I meant it. So at Rogue 5, we get some really fun toys. Uncanny Dodge lets us use our reaction to halve the damage that we took from an attack. It can be a nice lifesaver once in a while if we're not using our reaction for anything else. But Cunning Strike is the real gem of Rogue 5 now, I think, and it's pretty fantastic. It lets us sacrifice 1d6 of our sneak attack damage when we're applying sneak attack to instead attempt to do one of 3 things. Poison will give your target the poisoned condition for a minute if they fail their constitution save against it, the DC of which is happily based on our dexterity modifier. Poisoned is a great condition to inflict on an enemy, right? It gives disadvantage on their attack rolls and ability checks. So if they're not immune to poison, which admittedly in 2014 at least a lot of enemies were, this can be worth giving up a d6 of damage to attempt, even if they get to save against it at the end of each turn. Then there is Trip, which has them make a dexterity save or be prone if they're large or smaller. This would be great if we were in melee, but we're not. It can still be a really nice way to both slow an enemy and give your melee allies advantage on their attacks, right? Worth using sometimes. And then there's Withdraw, which lets us move up to half our speed without provoking opportunity attacks. And while, sure, we've got Cunning Action, keep in mind that using Cunning Action would be giving up potentially a d4 plus 6 damage, thanks to thrown weapon fighting style, right? Which is more than a d6 of sneak attack, yeah? So if someone's in our face, we could make a melee attack with our Psychic Blade or Dagger, say, add sneak attack, but reduce it by a d6, then step away and throw our next 2 attacks potentially. probably worth using unless that melee attack that we initially made was a critical hit. Anyways, our sneak attack jumps up to 3d6 at this level, and our Soulknife energy die jumps up to a d8, which is nice, but remember, right now that's only improving our psi-bolstered knack and our psychic whispers features. Man, I wish Psychic Blades got to enjoy a little bump in damage here too. I honestly don't know why they wouldn't. It's not like rogues are just killing it on the damage front. Consider this my plea to DMs out there to let the Psychic Blade damage jump up to a d8 here too, and just kind of keep pace with the Psychic Energy die as it scales. Sure, maybe the bonus action only goes from a d4 to a d6 if you really want. Whatever. Anyways, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. Okay, let's go over what combat is going to look like for us here. It's actually really straightforward. Every round, we are throwing one Psychic Blade with our action, and then, thanks to Nick, throwing a dagger with our action as well, though that one doesn't add our dexterity modifier if it hits. Finally, as a bonus action, we're throwing a second Psychic Blade that only does a d4 of damage, though this one does add our dexterity modifier to the damage, right? All three are also adding 2 damage per hit thanks to the thrown weapon fighting style. The first hit we land will add 3d6 of damage thanks to sneak attack, and yes, I am going to assume that all of our attacks have advantage. Why? Well, the first attack can get assisted from our familiar, potentially. Assuming we're making that with one of our Psychic Blades, if it hits, we'll have advantage on our next attack, thanks to Vex, and we would use our bonus action to throw our offhand Psychic Blade. Assuming that it lands, we would have advantage on our third attack, the Nick dagger attack. I don't think there's any reason we can't put our bonus action attack in the middle of our action attacks here. The rules specify that we can take our bonus action when we want on our turn, unless it's otherwise specified, and the only specification for when to take our bonus action to throw our second Psychic Blade is after we attack with the first. So we should be good here. Now, I appreciate that there's no guarantee that our Psychic Blade attack will hit, thus guaranteeing advantage on the next attack. But until Ludic Savant updates his damage calculator to account for Vex, and for those who don't know, yeah, Ludic Savant is the one who put the damage calculator tool together that I use. I link to it in the video description of all my videos. But until it gets updated, it's just too much work to do the math manually. So I'm going to assume the advantage, even though the reality is that we won't have it 100% of the time. So yeah, these numbers might be slightly inflated over like a true average, right? We'll make up for that a little bit later, I think. Anyways, thanks to Elven Accuracy, we're going to be rolling 3d20s to hit, and as a result, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would do 36 damage per round on average, and against a 15 AC, it would be barely less, 35 DPR. Thanks, Elven Accuracy. Man, I love that feat. Anyways, that damage is good, not great. However, it is beating baseline, especially at mid and higher enemy armor classes, and actually even the Valor Bard that I did at this level, which I don't have cards to link to, but that's what the thumbnail looks like. But maybe best of all, this damage is super sustainable and requires 0 setup as long as your familiar can stay alive. But even if they get blown up or you can't use them to get advantage on your first attack when you want at your table, the damage only goes down by a little bit. Overall, we are in a good place. Solid damage and about as strong a utility powerhouse as a rogue or any character for that matter can be. So let's see where we go from here. At level 7, we would be a rogue 6. And speaking of being a utility powerhouse, we get a second round of expertise here. At this point, I think I'm probably taking sleight of hand and maybe like investigation, depending on how often that comes up at your table. Feel free to go another route if you want, maybe persuasion or deception if it makes sense, especially keeping in mind that at next level, level 8, we would be a rogue 7, meaning that we get reliable talent now at rogue 7, 4 levels sooner than we used to, and that honestly feels like a huge deal to me. Reliable talent tells us that when we make a skill check with a skill that we are proficient in, any roll lower than a 10 just counts as a 10. Coupled with our bonuses, and especially if we have expertise in the skill, we are rarely going to fail an important skill check now, and that just feels super cool. But we even still get evasion at rogue 7 too, letting us take 0 damage if we succeed on a dexterity save that usually causes half damage on a successful save, right? And then half damage if we fail. Fireballs. Wow. And our sneak attack gets another bump up to 4d6. Man, level 7 is one of the best rogue levels ever. At level 9, we would be a rogue 8, and that means we get another feat. And in the name of, damage overall, let's go ahead and bump our dexterity here, capping it at 20. That's awesome, but I mean, let's be honest, it's not just damage, especially as a rogue. We're improving our most important skills, we're improving our armor class, initiative. Yeah, dexterity is still kind of the god ability. But this brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, we've seen a bump to our sneak attack and a bump to our dexterity, but not much else damage-wise. Our utility has seen some astronomical gains though, and we've even gotten a little survivability bump as well. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would do 42 damage per round on average, and against a 16 AC, it would be 41 DPR. Kind of like last time, we're kind of just a bit ahead of baseline here, though actually we do dip ever so slightly below it at the really low enemy armor classes. But honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised by where we are damage-wise, since these last few levels for us have been a lot more about big utility bonuses than damage ones, right? Can we keep up? Are we gonna get outscaled? Well, at level 10, we would be a Rogue 9, and that means as a Soulknife, we get the Soul Blades feature, which gives us 2 more uses for our Psychic Energy dice. Homing Strikes says that when we miss our target with our Psychic Blade, we can roll a Psychic Energy die to add to the attack roll, and if it then hits as a result, we expend the die. That is so awesome, honestly. I mean, to be fair, if we have advantage, thanks to Elven Accuracy, we're probably rarely missing. This is nice if for no other reason. It makes me feel like it's pretty safe to assume that we will have this available almost anytime we need it to turn a miss into a hit, since we'll need it so rarely, right? I'm not going to try and add it into our damage calculations though, both because it is still something that we would only be able to benefit from so often. I mean, it's 8 times per long rest, recovering 1 on a short rest, so I mean, we've got a lot of energy dice to be fair. But also, the math is complicated. I figure maybe with me making assumptions about having advantage, which might be, an over-assumption, not trying to add homing strikes into the equation might help the numbers I give be just a little more precise. So we'll call it a wash. It's still awesome. My favorite ability that we get here at this level though is Psychic Teleportation, which says that as a bonus action, we can summon a blade, expend an energy die, roll it, then throw the blade and teleport to where it lands, which can be up to 10 times the number rolled in feet. So on average, that'd be 45 feet for us at this level. So freaking cool. I really wish that it could be more of a blink strike here, letting us throw the dagger at an enemy, hit them with it, and then teleport to them. But I don't know, maybe they didn't want to steal the Shadow Monk's thunder, I guess. It's still super useful and super fun. Our sneak attack also gets a bump here to 5d6. At level 11, we would be a Rogue 10, and rogues get an extra feat at level 10. Woohoo! In the interest of trying to find ways to add more to our damage, I think I would take the Fighting Initiate feat here. This isn't available in the 2024 Player's Handbook, neither is Elven Accuracy for that matter. So, I mean, we kind of already crossed that line. If you can only play with, 2024 PHB stuff, I'd probably keep going down the cool feats that bump my dex by 1 path that I mentioned before, like Mage Slayer, Skulker, Skill Expert, etc. For those of us who can use old feats, Fighting Initiate is perfect for us because it lets us learn another fighting style. Which fighting style should we take? I actually want 2. 2-weapon fighting would let us add our dexterity modifier in damage to our old buddy Nick. 5 more damage per round now. That's not bad. But there's one that's even slightly better, actually. The dueling fighting style. Hang on a minute, you might be saying. That fighting style doesn't work with thrown weapons. Okay, let's break it down. Dueling says that when you're holding a melee weapon in one hand and no other weapons, you gain a +2 to damage with that weapon. Fortunately for us, since we're throwing weapons, when we make our attacks, there's no reason that we need to have another weapon in our other hand, so we should be fine. Yeah, but it says you have to be holding the weapon, you're screaming. Well, here's the thing. A while ago, Jeremy Crawford was asked if this fighting style worked with thrown weapons, and his response on Twitter was, "The dueling fighting style works with a thrown melee weapon. The feature doesn't limit itself to melee attacks." Yeah, but he was talking about the old version of the fighting style when he tweeted that, not the new 2024 version. Back then it said you had to be wielding the weapon. Now it says you have to be holding it, so it doesn't work anymore. I don't know. I don't buy it. When I make an attack with a weapon, I'm wielding it, just like I'm holding it. I don't think there's a substantive difference in word choice here. It seems to me like if they wanted to change the way it worked, they would have said when you make a melee attack and not just leave it at when you're holding a melee weapon, when you're wielding a melee weapon. Anyways, Treant Monk agrees with me, so there. That's my trump card. But hey, you and or your DM may rule otherwise, and if so, that's fine. Take the 2-weapon fighting style here instead. It's the difference of about 1 damage, no biggie. But what if we could do both? 2-weapon fighting and dueling on the same build? Again, if you believe Jeremy Crawford and think that the dueling fighting style works with thrown weapons, well, there's nothing that would inherently prohibit you from enjoying the benefit of the 2-weapon fighting style too. You don't have to be wielding 2 weapons at the same time in order to get the benefit of being able to add your dexterity modifier to that nick attack. It just says that when you make an extra attack as a result of using the weapon that has the light property, which is what we're doing with our nick dagger, you can add your ability modifier to the damage. Okay, great, let's go get it. Only problem is the fighting initiate feat isn't repeatable. That means either we take a ranger dip or a paladin dip, and since we don't have the strength and charisma to go pally, we're going ranger. You certainly wouldn't have to. The truth is, giving up some sneak attack damage to pick up damage from our dexterity modifier on 1 attack per turn is a very minor increase for us. And we'd be giving up some cool roguish utility as well, though to be fair, we would gain some ranger utility and support, mostly via spells, right? Feel free to just stay rogue, you'll be fine. In the interest of trying to eke out every point of damage possible, and because I really like rogues paired with rangers, sure, let's take a dip. Making us, at this level, a ranger 1, and that would give us 2 more weapon mastery, so go ahead and PYF there. Nothing I'll plan on using, but having more options is fun. And then we get favored enemy, which is great, and makes me angry at the same time. I am not going to get on my soapbox again about Hunter's Mark. If you want to see me rant about it, feel free to watch the Beastmaster video I did a few weeks ago. The thumbnail looks like this, if you missed it. But yeah, this feature is potentially nice. It says we know the Hunter's Mark spell and can cast it twice per day without spending a spell slot. Do I assume we've got it up when I calculate damage numbers going forward to add a d6 of damage to each attack? I'd love to. I really would, but I don't know that I can. I know I've added Hex and Hunter's Mark damage to number crunching in the past on builds, but it's something that I've become increasingly uncomfortable with, unless the damage we do is greater with it than without, even on the rounds when we have to give up our bonus action to cast or transfer the spell, right? If we're using our bonus action for Hunter's Mark, we're sacrificing a Psychic Blade attack that would do d4 plus 7 now, so 9.5 damage on average, to add potentially 2d6 to our damage that round, right? 1d6 on 2 attacks, which is 7 damage on average. Now, sure, the enemy is going to survive for more than 1 round sometimes, and in that case, it's potentially worth using overall, but so many fights in D&D 5e see enemies going down after you've only attacked them for a single round, right? If your allies are focus firing on the target especially, it just feels like too much of a stretch to assume Hex and or Hunter's Mark every turn all the time. Unless, again, you're making like maybe 3 attacks with your action or more, in which case it's more likely to be worth it. I feel really torn about it, honestly. So I'll tell you what, how about we do calculations assuming that we have to use a bonus action to transfer Hunter's Mark every other round. That way we can still enjoy a little benefit from it, but I don't feel quite so dirty just assuming that we've got it up on every attack. Fair? As for the other spells that we get, because as you know, rangers, we get spells right at level 1 now, which is awesome. I'd probably be focusing on support and utility stuff like Good Berry, Cure Wounds. These will be really great to have in a pinch and give us a nice kind of backup healer. Somebody's got to bring the healer back up if they go unconscious. At level 13, though, we would be a Ranger 2, and this means that we get Deft Explorer, which gives us expertise in 1 more skill of our choice, meaning expertise in 5 skills now. And combined with reliable talent, dang, so good. Pick your favorite on what to take here, whatever best fits your character or fills a gap in your party's utility. But then we get the main reason that we wanted to come Ranger, silly enough, maybe, a fighting style. And yes, let's grab 2-weapon fighting so that we can finally add our dexterity modifier to all of our attacks every single turn. Just in time for our next damage report. Okay, since last check, we've seen another little sneak attack bump, 2 more damage on every attack thanks to the dueling fighting style, 5 more damage on our Nick attack from the 2-weapon fighting style, an extra d6 from Hunter's Mark, though we're giving up our bonus action Psychic Blade attack every other round to cast or transfer it, I'll assume, and I'm just kind of crunching numbers for both rounds and then averaging it. But then we've picked up a ton more utility and even support options now, making us feel more well-rounded than ever. And so, against enemies with an armor class of 10 here, we would on average do 61 damage per round. And against a 17 AC, it would be just one less, as always so far, 60 DPR. And again, that's an average, assuming we're giving up our bonus action every other round to transfer Hunter's Mark. Okay, where does that land us? Despite my best efforts, we are falling just slightly behind baseline here, at least until about an enemy AC of 20 and higher, which, to be fair, at level 13 isn't all that uncommon, right? But yeah, it's like the water is rising. We're treading water, we're having to like tilt our heads up to be able to keep breathing. But hey, let's be honest. That baseline build was built for damage and pretty much nothing else. We, on the other hand, are a veritable smorgasbord of utility with a smattering of support in addition to keeping up damage-wise. So honestly, I'm thrilled. 60 damage per round, come on, that's still pretty dang good. And even if we just ignore Hunter's Mark completely, it's only a couple 3 points lower. All right, at level 14, as much as I'd really love to get back to Rogue, I mean, one more Ranger level means we get a Ranger subclass. And while Gloomstalker is fun and potent, and Fey Wanderer would mean even better utility, plus a little more damage, if we're really interested in damage overall, Hunter is probably our best bet here. Now, going Ranger 3 would mean we're not going to get to that sweet, sweet new Rogue feature Devious Strikes by the end of the build, at least for this video, at level 17, and that does make me kind of sad, truly. But as a hunter, we get Hunter's Prey, which means Colossus Slayer, which adds a d8 of damage to our target when we hit them with a weapon once per turn, so long as the enemy doesn't have all of their hit points. And that makes me feel a lot better about missing out on another d6 of sneak attack damage, right? Better yet, in 2024, we can actually swap between Colossus Slayer and Hordebreaker after a short or long rest if we want. And Hordebreaker is still great in that it lets us make an extra attack against another enemy if that enemy is standing next to our original target. Super fun when you need it. And yes, I'm going to be building a cleave build around this and other cool, 2-target features. Eventually, it's on my to-do list anyways. What's more, hunters now get the Hunter's Lore feature, a really solid bit of utility. And this kind of convinced me to go Ranger 3 more than the damage, because this tells us that when an enemy is marked by our Hunter's Mark, we can automatically know their resistances, immunities, or vulnerabilities if they have any. And that, honestly, might be the best Hunter's Mark buff that any Ranger ever gets. I like that more than not losing concentration on Hunter's Mark when you take damage, more than like letting a Beastmaster pet get a little extra damage from it, more even than the Ranger Capstone, which raises Hunter's Mark to a D10, which, to be fair, says more about the quality of the capstone than anything. But yeah, this feature is really great. Now, sometimes it won't tell us anything, but if it can save our party from doing less damage or let us take advantage of a vulnerability or avoid an immunity, right? That is huge. Hunter's Mark now is like totally worth a bonus action, I think. But at level 15, it's high time we get back to Rogue, isn't it? That would make us a Rogue 11, which means we get improved Cunning Strike, which tells us that we could now use 2 Cunning Strike options when we do sneak attack damage instead of just 1, though we still have to pay the cost for each, but that means we could poison and trip our target, or trip them and withdraw. This gets better when we get more Cunning Strike options later, but it's still potentially really useful right now. Our sneak attack gets a bump up to 6d6 here, and our energy die gets a bump up to d10 for better skill checks, further teleports, better hit chance, and longer lasting telepathic communication. Sweet. At level 16, we would be a Rogue 12, and that means we get another feat, and now that I am super interested in holding on to concentration, yeah, maybe I'd go Resilient Constitution here to bump my Constitution by 1 and give me proficiency in Constitution saving throws to help out concentration, among other things. If you're less concerned about concentration, maybe you're not really using Hunter's Mark, then sure, bump Wisdom or go with one of the other feats that I've mentioned. Skulker, Mage Slayer, Skilled would make you ridiculous at this point with your Skill Monkey power, or something else that you like more. But then finally for us at level 17, we'd be a Rogue 13, and as a soul knife, that means we get Psychic Veil, which says that once per long rest or by burning a psychic energy die, we can take a magic action to go invisible for an hour. It's not greater invisibility or anything. It ends if we deal damage or force a creature to make a saving throw. But I mean, hey, maybe we go invisible, sneak up on our enemy, cast Hunter's Mark on them. That wouldn't break our invisibility. Then wait 6 seconds and start combat. They may or may not be surprised. Depends on how your DM plays, like what Hunter's Mark may look or feel like. But if it doesn't immediately initiate combat, heck, cast it, wait 6 seconds, transfer it to a different enemy, go around the whole battlefield, figuring out everyone's resistances and vulnerabilities and potential immunities, right? That is some grade A reconnaissance work right there. And Hunter's Mark lasts for an hour, so you've got all the time in the world. Pretty awesome. And then yes, our sneak attack gets its final bump for us up to 7d6. Now, I will just say, if we were taking this character to 20, I think you've got a couple options. A couple more levels in Hunter would get us to extra attack, and that's nice, you know, 1 more attack per round, as well as another feat, 2nd level ranger spells. But on the other hand, you know, just staying rogue would let us pick up devious strikes so that we could blind or daze or even just straight up knock an enemy out. That would be so cool. Slippery Mind from rogue would give us wisdom and charisma saving throw proficiency, meaning that if we took resilient constitution, we'd have proficiency in every single save but strength by that point. That's awesome. Also, people often ask me what epic boon I would take if I got one, and maybe the main reason why I don't talk about it that much is because most of the time my answer isn't going to be that interesting. If I'm making attacks, combat prowess is almost always the best one for numbers. I mean, sure, dimensional travel or fate or skill and several others would also be really cool, really fun, super useful. Anyways, it's time for our final damage report. Since last check, we've seen a couple more bumps to our sneak attack. We've gotten a D8 from Colossus Slayer and piled on boatloads of additional utility, survivability, and awesomeness. But against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 74 DPR. And against an 18 AC, it would be 1 less, as always, 73 damage per round. And compared to other 2024 sustained damage builds that I've done to date, similar to last time, we're even just slightly below that optimized, I can do this all day baseline build until an enemy AC of 21 now, which, I mean, sure, again, at level 17, 21 might be a more common AC than the 18 that I reported on, right? So to me, it feels like we're about on par as that baseline, at least for most fights. Okay, let's get into the final thoughts. The tier score for this build. If you take the damage that they do against every armor class that we calculated for at each of the 4 damage reports and just average them into one big number, we get 50? Wait, what? 50? That's 1 higher than the baseline tier score. Woo! We did it! Okay, so what? The hardest hitting sustained damage rogue I can build just barely manages to keep pace with baseline? Well, hold your horses there. First of all, calling that build a baseline is probably misleading. I maybe need to come up with a different term. It's a hyper-optimized build focused on doing damage above all, just not using any resources or needing any setup to do that damage, right? I have a feeling that I'm gonna end up with plenty of builds eventually that fall below it. And it would be tempting in that case to think that the damage for the build sucks. That build does solid damage. And yeah, so does this one. But of course, you know what I'm going to say. The beauty of this build is that it manages to compete damage-wise and hold on to all that gorgeous, roguish utility and flavor, even throwing in a bit of survivability and support along the way. It truly feels like a having your cake and eating it too build to me, and for that, I adore it. One thing I will add though, a potential big drawback to the Soulknife and any build that has these sort of built-in weapons, right, is that not only does the Psychic Blade damage not scale as written, but those blades also don't increase in their hit chance or add other cool effects like you might be getting if you're using magic weapons. If I'm being honest, it kind of feels like a big oversight on Wizards of the Coast's part to me to leave that out, as though we don't play in a world where magic weapons exist and are often fairly prolific for players. So yeah, in a lab, this keeps up fine with baseline, but at most tables, without a little maybe homebrew love, it would fall behind, compared to that fighter barbarian who might be using a +1 or a +2 or heck, a flame blade sword or something, right? So here's my plea to DMs out there watching this. Not only would I ask you to let the damage from Psychic Blades scale alongside the Psychic Energy die, but also maybe at those same levels potentially, let them add a +1, a +2, and eventually a +3 to hit and damage. It will make your rogue player so happy and keep them from feeling like they're lagging way behind the other martial character. But hey, maybe you're okay with them lagging behind because it's not all about the numbers, people. Gosh, how many times do I have to tell you? And this build brings so much more than just good damage numbers. So yeah, in the end, turns out I still really love the rogue, like a lot, and especially the Soulknife. Man, I hope I get to play this build in game sometime soon. But that is the build for the week. So I hope you enjoyed it. Ah, Colby, you sweet summer child. So naive. Okay, here's the great irony, right? It's that, actually, rules as written, no, this build doesn't keep up with the baseline. Though again, I probably need to start calling that build something other than baseline. But regardless, the damage is worse than advertised, without some leniency from your DM. And maybe that, finally, is like the big takeaway, right? Again, I know, Treant Monk put out that rogue video showing that damage is actually better than he thought, potentially largely thanks to True Strike. But ultimately, I do think that rogues are gonna lag behind other builds when it comes to damage, at least for builds where we're trying to stay mostly or all rogue. That said, I haven't changed my mind about the fact that, rogues are, regardless, in a better place now than they were in 2014, thanks largely to additional utility and debuffing and control. But if I couldn't convince my DM to let Psychic Blades be light weapons, here are two options for how to change this build. Option 1, forego ranger levels completely and just stick with rogue other than that single level fighter dip. So you'd be a rogue 16. We don't need the 2-weapon fighting style if we're not making a Nick dagger attack. And it's even harder to justify spending a bonus action for Hunter's Mark, right, if we're only making one attack with our action. Now, this has the silver lining benefit of giving us more sneak attack damage than I originally calculated, and access to those higher level rogue features that are really great, like Devious Strikes and Slippery Mind, and another ability score increase or feat. So it's not a total loss. I have crunched numbers for a Nicholas Ranger-free build, and I added them to the spreadsheet. Check the video description to see the link to that spreadsheet. You'll see two sets of numbers, the ones that I've kind of already outlined, and then to the side, the updated Rangerless version. At the damage reports for 6 and 9, the damage decrease is only 4 or 5 points, so it's not huge. At levels 13 and 17, it's a little more significant. It's kind of more like around 15 points of damage less, depending on the level, depending on the enemy armor class. Option 2 would be, to take 5 levels in a class that has extra attack. If we did this, we could do the following. Take the attack action, and for our first attack, throw a Psychic Blade. Then for our second attack that we get from extra attack, throw a dagger. Since we've now attacked with a light weapon as part of our attack action, we could throw a second dagger, still with our attack, and take advantage of the Nick Mastery. Finally, since we attacked with a Psychic Blade as part of our attack action, we could then, with our bonus action, summon a second Psychic Blade and throw it. I'm a little bummed going this route because I really kind of wanted to avoid taking 5 levels in another class, right? I wanted to be mostly rogue from the get-go and stay mostly rogue, but alas, here we are. As for which class to take, I think both the fighter and the ranger would work great. Barbarian could actually be a solid choice as well, though you'd likely be building around strength, not dexterity there, meaning your roguish skill and utility would be diminished. The barbarian version is like a very different character, I think. I haven't gone to the lengths of really fleshing that build out or crunching numbers, though I have done similar builds in the past that do something like this, both the Soulknife and the Claw build that was the barbarian version. Needless to say, I've got a build like this on my to-do list and plan on doing a deep dive, thorough treatment of it to kind of flesh it all out. I hope you know how much I love you. I do. You are so awesome. You guys, thanks so much for the support that you give to me and this channel. I hope you have a really great day and a fabulous week. And if you don't, I hope that you will hold on. Keep your chin up, just like the rogue. Sometimes you gotta just tread that water, right? Better days are sure to come. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Oh, the fox went out on a chilly night, prayed for the moon to give him light, for he'd many a mile to go that night before he reached the town, oh, town, oh, town, oh, he'd many a mile to go that night before he reached the town, oh. Any other Nickel Creek fans out there? Not Nickelback, Nickel Creek. Very different musical palette. That song is, I think, their most popular song, but it's also a nursery rhyme that they just put to music, which is kind of funny. And it was my son Knox's favorite song when he was little. Every time he'd get in the car, he'd be like, "Town-o, town-o." And it's kind of a gruesome one, as old nursery rhymes and fairy tales so often are, right? It's just kind of about this fox that goes and like kills some geese and chickens, and his kids are all like, "These are delicious." That's the whole song. I think I'm gonna actually do something different with this space and maybe have my sister, who's an interior decorator, kind of make it look a little bit like an old tavern, if I can. We'll see. We're weeks, if not months, out from that, but we're just kind of talking about what that might look like and kind of designing it, so that'll be cool. The acoustics in here feel a little more echoey to me, which is not a great thing. I might have to look at getting like some baffling or something to put on the walls so that it dampens that a little. I've tried to adjust the mic so that the gain is lower, so I don't know, maybe you don't pick up that echo as much as I do in my ears. So, you've heard... Let's start that over. Hey everybody, so here at D4, I like to theorycraft about my I like... Man, the acoustics are throwing me off. Probably go with Sage. No, I don't think I would actually. And I need to move my mic. This is bugging me. I'm at risk of like hitting it with my hand all the time. They obviously knew that people had questions about this. Well, don't say that. People are gonna, how do you know what they thought? Blah, blah, blah. It's already gonna be a cluster of comments. People critiquing my interpretation here, and that's fine. We, on the other hand, are a veritable smorgasbord of utility. Smorgasbord. Okay, I think we're done.